instead of realizing this was our call to action, this was our call to reunite with that nature before we make everything that we know extinct.
How can we reverse it? How can we really heal our gut so that we can thrive?
We are a biophotonic biology. We create electrons out of food.
If I want my plants to thrive, of course, the soil has to be nutrient dense and rich. And that is the same for our human body.
Human biology is very similar to that oak tree starting to grow out of the ground.
We know that there's an issue. That is definitely the case. And we can just look at the rise of numbers and cancer and all these diseases. I love what you say. I found this really fascinating, actually, when I was doing some research on you, that you don't believe in taking probiotics, which I thought was really interesting because so many people, and this is why I was saying at the start, people are so confused. They have no idea what to do. But I want to hear your thoughts on probiotics, why we should not take.
Yeah, so probiotics are just a perfect example of what we were talking about before, where we try to do these micromanagement approaches to solve for big complex problems. Vitamin D could be another example. Vitamin D from the sunshine, as it hits the skin, does an extraordinary array of endocrine changes, adapts our endocrine system, makes us more insulin sensitive, and yes, increases the steroid hormone power that we have within us through the vitamin D molecule and all this. But then when we dumb that down to just vitamin D3 and we take 5,000 units or 10,000 units and we then downregulate vitamin D receptors through our kidneys and liver and skin systems, we start to lose and dysregulate if we're chronically on these supplements. In contrast, or along those same lines, I guess, is the probiotics. So probiotics came and said, wow, you've got a deficiency of good bacteria. You need a few good bacteria. And then they say, well, we're actually going to give you like 50 billion good bacteria. And then, of course, what they mean by that is they're going to give you 50 billion copies of the same bacteria. And that's where myself and all of us as physicians and consumers made the big mistake, is we kept reading the bottle that said, 100 billion CFU. Wow, that sounds like a great new microbiome for my gut. Not putting together that the 3 species of bacteria in there, or the 7 species, or now some are bragging 24 species, pales in comparison to the 30,000 species that an ideal gut may have, or the 5 million species of fungi that are starting to be realized to be on the planet around us, or the protozoa and the parasites, 300,000, 500,000 species. Like just the sheer amount of biodiversity that's supposed to be in a soil ecosystem, and therefore ultimately in some form or fashion in a gut ecosystem, will only be suppressed if you're taking billions of copies of 3 species. You can take a look at the farming and agricultural system yet again to see the same effect. And so in the 1970s, we started to really amp up factory farming scale. And we went from the average family farm being maybe 300 acres to suddenly 3,000 acres. And now in many districts, 10,000, 30,000 acres. Massive mega farms that have eliminated all of the biodiversity of their paycheck, first of all, instead of having cows and chickens and some pigs on the farm, and then some huge farm to garden vegetable, or farm to market garden, and then 5 or 10 species of staple crops, then some hay and cover crops. Instead of doing all that, we dumbed it down to just 3 species, and we eliminated all that biodiversity for corn, soybean, alfalfa, wheat. And so by doing so, we destroyed the ecosystem of some 97% of the agricultural land on Earth now. And we've done that in such a short period of time. At the exact same time that we launched that effort, we launched this probiotic industry out of the 1970s saying, oh, we found a few good bacteria. The downside of that is, of course, you're planting 3 species across the whole terrain and crowding out the biodiversity effect. But just as fundamentally flawed in some ways is the idea that there's good and bad bacteria. We no longer can consider there to be bad bacteria or bad viruses. There's only viruses and there's only bacteria. And they find their goodness in the ecosystem biodiversity. There is no ethic in a bacteria. A bacteria or a fungi or a virus has no ethos. It has a high level of integrity for beauty.
Yeah. So I was just going to say something. So it's not about labeling good viruses, good bacteria, bad bacteria. What makes it good or bad is the environment in which it's in. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what we see is that, as you start to see biodiversity come in, that there's a niche within that ecosystem for every bacteria. Some examples of this would be something like Pseudomonas. Pseudomonas is one of the most feared bacteria in a bone marrow transplant unit or hospital ICU. They can wreak massive havoc in these ICUs and have fatal consequences very quickly. And so we came to think that Pseudomonas was bad. The only reason Pseudomonas is in an ICU or in a bone marrow transplant unit is it can be quite resilient against many forms of antibiotics. And so it's the last man standing and then gets blamed as if it's the problem. When in fact, if you look at a complex ecosystem of soil and the rest, Pseudomonas has a critical role in something interesting, which is detoxing radioactive material that's present in normal geologic systems, soil systems, and the like. And in fact, we can use those Pseudomonas to clean up nuclear waste. We can use it to clean up, nuclear waste sites that have, been devastating the ecosystem. Pseudomonas can move in there and accelerate that cleanup process. And so it would be ridiculous to call Pseudomonas bad when it has a very critical and unique niche within the survival of a planet. We keep blaming the weed that crops up in the middle of the farm, not realizing that the reason the weed is there is because it's the only species present right now that can give the soil back what it needs right now. If you let that weed grow up and do its work and then surround the whole system by opportunity for biodiversity, the next year that weed won't be there. And we see this over and over again. Farmers who have been battling weeds for 10, 15, 30 years, and their neighbors are all battling these invasive weeds. This one farmer in the middle of this wasteland of multi-drug resistant, Roundup resistant, weeds suddenly goes into a biodynamic, biologic relationship with its soil. And that farmer is now only caring about the carbon cycling and nutrient density and oxygenation and water holding capacity of its soils. Suddenly within a year, it's almost as if you put up this invisible fence around their farm. There are no weeds. We have farmers that send in, you could see on my Instagram recently, of a farmer in Kentucky who, for the first time, for the very first season, decided to go into a regenerative organic practice and planted a cover crop. And he's literally driving through acres of alfalfa that's grown up through his cover crop. And now he's overseeding his next crop as he harvests the alfalfa. And he's blowing his mind that for as far as he can see, there is not a single weed. It's all the intentional biodiversity that he's created. And yet, if you look across the fence line at his farmer's land, the same invasive, quote unquote, bad weeds are there. When the soil healed, there was no more role for that weed to do its extraordinary effort towards biodiversity. It's the same thing in a body. It turns out when you see a yeast infection after an antibiotic exposure, that yeast infection is not your problem. Yeast infection is actually trying to reestablish a soil that the bacteria can move back into. And so if we wipe that out with an antifungal, now you're just sterile soil, and it's going to take you much longer to recover. A great study on probiotics was demonstrated in 2018, showing in mice and humans that if you took a probiotic after 2 weeks of antibiotic, there was an effort towards recovery immediately. And so in the placebo group, you could see the almost immediate and rapid climb in bacterial diversity and number start up within 24, 48 hours after stopping the antibiotic. Over the 2 weeks of the antibiotic, you lost 80% of your biodiversity, but you start recovering that instantly. And within 30 days, the whole cohort of humans or mice are back to their normal population on a placebo sugar pill. In contrast, if they start a probiotic, that same trajectory of recovery, after just 3 days of a probiotic, starts to head back down. And after 5 days, 7 days of a probiotic, it has suppressed the microbiome at the same level that 2 weeks of antibiotics had. And so in all of these years, as I practiced as a physician recommending people take their probiotic after an antibiotic, I was doing exactly the wrong thing. I was planting a monocrop across now denuded or tilled up soil of their gut and planting a monocrop there, and they could not recover their biodiversity. They would be better off having it as a sugar pill. We now sell $47 billion a year of probiotics globally. This is the insanity of our effort to try to mimic or somehow micromanage the nature within us and without us. If we don't start to respect her and her magic and her capacity to bring forth life, we'll continue to fail in that mimicry.
I'd love to hear if you could put one book in the school curriculum of every single high school around the world. what book would you choose? It doesn't have to be health related. It could be spiritual. It could be whatever you want, but just that high school age for boys and girls. What would the book be?
I could only pick one.
Yeah.
That's hugely challenging because I got 3 books in my head right now that are dueling. So,
Okay.
I have
Tell,
that there is
tell
no
us the
conflict.
3.
There's no
You can have
conflict
3.
between these books. I'm going to actually go with Australia on this one. And so Charles Massey recently wrote a book that just blows my mind every time I open it. It is called The Call of the Reed Warbler. And Charles Massey is a farmer in Eastern Australia there who for decades was practicing conventional chemical farming and finding himself more and more impoverished by the experience at the spiritual level, at the financial level, and all of this. And in starting to see the nature and beauty around him again, and starting to reconnect to that, he created a completely different path for himself. And he is now one of the real godfathers of this field of regenerative health and regenerative, farming on the planet. And so Charles Massey's book, I think, if we could just show the children how beautiful the land is and that we've been called in for generations, for in fact millennia, we've been called into a spiritual relationship with her. If we could imbue our children with that vision, I think we would create a much different future.
I want to hear now how your day runs. I love hearing about how people prime themselves for the day. Like, do you meditate? How do you set yourself up for success? What are your little routines throughout the day? And what's like a typical day on your plate? I know no 2 days is probably ever the same, but can you kind of walk us through a typical day in your life?
I think you just kind of nailed it. I think my success has come out of the fact that I don't let 2 days look alike. I have been on a full out hard press over the last 10 years to make sure that I am never walking the same path twice. And this has created such wealth in my life in regards to the humans around me. I have the most extraordinary coworkers, staff, everything else that just surround me with brilliance, surround me with a productivity that I would never be capable of approaching on my own. Just like, over and over again, the colleagues, the friends, the just tribe that has gathered around me has been such an enriching experience. And I could never, imagine going back and doing life differently than the last decade has taken me. Previous to that, my life was very predictable. I'd wake up at, between 4:30 and 6 a.m. I would, rush to get some food into me and see if I could help out getting the kids out of bed or whatever. And then I would, rush off to the hospital and I'd spend 12 hours or, not unusually 36, 40 hours on a continuous shift, working overnight and everything else in the hospital system, and then be back and sleep and reconnect with kids, read them to bed, and then start over again. And through that effort, I became so lonely. I was so isolated from community, from connection, as any sense of nature. I had forgotten I was human. I had become a simple jockey for the pharmaceutical industry, and I was a technician, not human. I might as well have been an AI robot delivering healthcare because I was losing my humanity by the day, and I was majorly depressed. And it was through that desperation, the kind of suicidal state that I was in by 2010, that brought me to that breaking point where I was willing to sacrifice everything. And I was willing to walk away from 17 years of higher education and medical degrees and subspecialties and all that, just to say, I just have to do something fundamentally different. And I started this tiny little clinic in a rural Virginia town of 550 people in a food desert, and decided if I could teach nutrition here and I could find a curriculum that worked there, then maybe I could be part of a new revolution of health in this country. And it was a pipe dream of an idea, ridiculous if anybody really sat and listened to what I thought it would be capable of doing. And of course, I completely undershot what I thought it was capable of doing. I didn't realize that my patients would be my best teachers and my best friends. I didn't realize that my colleagues that would come out of the non-academic environment would be the most brilliant people I'd ever met. I didn't realize that the integrity of humanity would completely trump any ethical belief system or pedagogic belief system, or whatever kind of science you want to put around it, paled in comparison to just the sheer integrity of people that want to create a different future. And that's the tribe that I live in. And so when I wake up in the morning, I literally no longer have a to-do list, which is a little trippy because I used to live and die by those. And now I just wake up with a bit of curiosity, with a sense of, I wonder what's going to happen today. Because when I look at my calendar and, I have interviews and podcasts and, board meetings and, staff meetings and creative meetings and all these things on my calendar, they're just placeholders for actual human interaction. And now I no longer have, a to-do list going into a meeting. I expect something new to happen. I expect to see something brilliant come out of the humans that I'm going to interact with. And if I tune into that instead of an agenda on the meeting, I do find, remarkable new discoveries every day. And I feel like I get richer, more intelligent, if you will, certainly more conscious through that human journey. And so in a weird way, I have no answer to your question other than start your day with surrender and try to end your day with surrender again. Because I will beat the crap out of myself for the things I didn't achieve today. I will beat the crap out of myself out of the patience I didn't have today, or the creativity I didn't give myself time for, or the exercise that I didn't, or self-care that I didn't do. You got to surrender all of that at the end of the day as well, as you fall into sleep in the astral planes there and start to go into that dream state of what tomorrow could bring. If you start to imprint the past upon the tomorrow, you're again going to fail to realize a transformational event. You're going to simply repeat. And so surrender at the beginning of the day and surrender at the end of the day. And between those two bookends, you're going to find a lot of miracles and a lot of beauty in humanity.
Absolutely. I love it. Surrender, it's so important. So thank you for sharing that. I've got 3 rapid fire questions for you now. Are you ready?
I hope so.
What is one thing that we can all do today for our health?
Get outside.
Yeah. What's one thing that we can all do today for more wealth? So more abundance in all areas of our life.
Hug more people.
Yes. And what is one thing that we can all do today for more love?
See the beauty. I would like to explain that one.
Beautiful. Yeah, go for it.
I have been struggling for the last, 10 years for sure, but I think really through this whole lifetime, I've been struggling to understand love. And I've looked at my own journey and the many heartbreaks I've had in relationships. I look at the parenting journey, and my kids now 22 and 20 years old and both very successful in their own rights and very unique human beings and proficient adults and everything else. And I wonder if I even know how to really love them, because I can't see all of them. I never could. I get these glimpses of the majesty in both of my children, but I can't really wrap my head around that. And so I've always had this sneaking suspicion that I don't know how to love. I don't know how to really do that thing completely. I don't know if I even know the definition of love in the end. And no matter how many books I read on the 5 types of love and all of this and all of the words in Eskimo for love, and you can read all of that. Now living in Hawaii, aloha means hello and I love you, and goodbye, and all of these things. Like, there's so many references. The Beatles, for God's sakes, are trying to tell us what love is. And so in that journey, I was developing a real, almost insecurity within myself, a fear that I didn't know what love was. And I actually lectured on this, like basically begging for the answer. And this past year, one of my colleagues and best friends, Patrick Gentempo, a brilliant chiropractor and philosopher, has been on an extraordinary journey with his wife, understanding plant intelligence and the intelligence of the ethers around us and all of the entities and angels and all of this far out stuff they've been diving into hard. And he keeps getting messages from the other side of the veil for specific people. And I was so blessed last year when he called up and said, I've received a message that I'm supposed to tell you, but I really want to tell you this in person. So it took me about 6 weeks before I could fly over to Utah and connect with him. And we'd spent 24 hours together and played some music and hung out and did some hikes. And then right before I was going back to the airport, we went out to breakfast together, and we were sitting at this table. And he hadn't mentioned it at all, the conversation or the reason that I'd shown up for. throughout that 24 hours. And as I sat down, he began to into this with the sentence, tell Zach that humanity has made a mistake in its belief that the fabric of everything is love. And I got goosebumps all over my body at that moment. And I knew that whatever was going to come out of his mouth at the next moment was literally the most important truth that I had been chasing in this lifetime, maybe many lifetimes before. And I was just like in the most incredibly heightened state of anticipation for that next sentence. And as soon as he said it, I started to bawl. And I just cried uncontrollably in this restaurant in the morning. I just couldn't, it was the most, one of the most unleashed cries I've ever had in my life. And what he said was that the fabric of everything is beauty. And in seeing the beauty, you will experience love. It just solved the entire equation instantly for me, because I knew beauty. And I knew deeply that I could even see the beauty within myself. And in that moment, I knew that love was not the fabric of anything. Love is not a thing. Love is not something that I need to generate or need to focus a beam of to everybody else. Love is the experience that I'm going to have in seeing the beauty of Mother Nature, seeing the beauty of the smile on my daughter's face, seeing the lines in my son's hands as he sets down his fencing sword. Whatever it is, like these little details in my children that I can start crying. I'm sorry, but these little details that the human mind will capture of that parenting journey. The first time you see your child, the first time you see that kid touch another human being with intention and kindness, these little glimpses of them, there's just such extraordinary, exquisite beauty in there. And that solves for what is love. Love is the experience of being witness to their beauty. And at that moment, I just knew that I loved my kids so thoroughly. And I had never failed in that love for them. I had never failed to love my wife and children and mother of those children. And even in our divorce and her discovery of her soulmate, as I walked that journey with her, I found out I could love her even in that, because there was beauty in what she was experiencing, the truth she was telling me during that time. And I realized that in finding my wife of today, I could see her and recognize her from a great distance, because I was recognizing beauty that my eyes had been blinded to before, and she could see the beauty within me without me opening my mouth. And we started on a journey into love without the heady, belief that we were going to create this love, or we had to make sure we were in love enough. It became this instantaneous realization of that there was always an easy access to love. There was never a deficiency of love, because it was not a thing. It was an experience. And I've had that experience, and I look forward to having it more intensely with every human being I meet. And here's another moment, and I can look into your eyes and experience another soul that's held space through the incredible effort you've done to create this platform for communication, this platform of education, this platform of human fellowship you've created. And you're giving me opportunity to show me something of myself. I mean, that you've shown me such respect in letting me run my mouth for a period of time and never have a succinct answer to anything. But I just know that you can see something of me, because I know that I can see something of you. And so we can love each other right now for having never met before, but have fully experienced something of love and the beauty that we can see in each other. And if that's the way we live each day, we will be very rich.
Really beautiful, Zach. Thank you so much. And one of the things that I just loved out of that little sermon was that, we have to look at and find the beauty, because there's beauty in everything, in every bit of nature, in every human being we interact with. There is beauty, and it's our job to look for it. So thank you so much for sharing that. That was such a beautiful way to end. Is there anything else that you want to share? Is there any last parting words of wisdom, or anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't get to ask you about?
I think I might be wrung out here. I think, I hope that each of you realize how miraculous you are in listening to this. And I hope that each of you come to appreciate that you showed up right now. We have 7.8 billion people. And that'd be interesting if that was a bunch of human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens. But it gets much more interesting if 7.8 billion souls showed up right now behind those human beings, within and animating those human beings. Why did you show up right now? This is the tipping point. This is the worst time of human history. No, it's the best time of human history because we are ready for a massive transformation. And you showed up right now. And so as we start to explore the future, I would invite you to, I hope, find silence in everything that you just heard today. And instead of trying to remember anything that me or Melissa have said in the last hour, instead, remember the reverence and the silence that maybe it engendered in you. And you took a pause, and maybe something caught your breath, and maybe something caused a screeching halt in the repetitive thoughts in your mind or your self-doubt. In that halt, in that silence, we have the opportunity to start to envision and, in fact, rehearse a future for all of those that are going to become awake and all of those that are going to participate in that new reality. And so in the silence, let the creative juices do their work and create something truly de novo, truly new to your experience and to your appreciation of beauty. And then let's start to communicate that together. I'd be fascinated if you would give Melissa feedback as to what happens to you in the next week as you find out that the fabric of everything is beauty. How are you going to see your kids differently? How are you going to see your spouses? How are you going to see your career differently? Which career are you going to pick now, realizing that your career maybe is not taking you towards beauty and it's taking you towards a soul-crushing emptiness? What are you going to do, and how long is it going to take you to make that choice for transformation? The world is pausing right now. We have a pandemic of possibility now. There is no old normal that we should or can return to. And so let's make sure we do something radical in these next steps. Let's not take the next steps towards a military state. Let's not take steps to take away more civil liberties. Let's do something radical and reconnect to a nature that knows how to heal everything. Gift. But I would love for your community. We really have a desperate need to create a global community around shared purpose. We can no longer have a nationalistic, belief or view on success. If we don't start thinking as a Homo sapiens sapiens species level organism, if we don't start to express that sort of hyper-intelligence that we're capable of when we all connect, I fear our time is too short and we will not transform quick enough. But if you will look for opportunities to connect with me or connect to others who are on this path towards nature and towards recovery and regeneration, I will be in deep gratitude to you. If you don't know how to connect to that crew, you can certainly just go to my education site, which is my name, zachbushmd.com. We've got a lot of free education and insights on different aspects. Podcasts on a lot of different variety of stuff are exemplified there. But we're launching a new free education platform on Instagram and social media where we're trying to I've got a GoFundMe program going right now. If you go to my Instagram and click through there, or if you go to my website, you'll be able to find it there. But the GoFundMe is a project to bring forth a group of scientific researchers and writers to bring free education online. There's been too many paywalls and special interests around integrative medicine and this new understanding of human and biologic health. And so if you want to support that program, we're raising $250,000 to hire a whole team of researchers and writers to start bringing out weekly content to the world to expand on what you've heard today. I don't have enough time and bandwidth to bring all this stuff in my head out on podcasts. And what's in my head is just a fraction of the important new science that's emerging from genomics and nature and everything else. So the GoFundMe program for the global health education platform would be wonderful to support. Of course, our nonprofit work in Australia is launching, as I mentioned earlier, with Project Biome Australia. That website should be coming up by September, something like that. In the meantime, you can go to farmersfootprint.us and take a look at our direct-to-farm projects and get a glimpse of something like non-toxic neighborhoods. It's now making a great debut in Australia and New Zealand with Kim Conti has developed a whole toolkit for your municipality to ban Roundup in city parks, school systems, streetscapes, and the like to bring organic solutions into that environment. So all of these ways to engage would be much appreciated. Stay tuned. ZachBushMD.com will also be bringing you new opportunities to engage. We have a philanthropic fund called the Next Pandemic Fund that's launching soon. We have a big impact investment for-profit fund for qualified investors in the near future. So many ways for you to engage. If you lose track of these opportunities, you can always return to Zach Bush MD and look for constant updates there. We have a newsletter that you can sign up for there that should keep you informed as these new opportunities arise.
And we can link to everything in the show notes as well. So if anyone wants to go and check any of what Zach has said, then we'll just link to all of that in the show notes for you. This has been amazing and so beautiful. Your wisdom that you have shared, your heart, you have just showed up so honestly, so vulnerably, so openly. And I want to honor you for that. Like, I really appreciate that. And for all the work that you're doing in the world. You are such a beautiful trailblazing light. And I'm so grateful for everything that you're out there doing and for taking the time to share with us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for the fellowship and the opportunity to be together.